So I'm going to mention the story that you might not have heard on the recording. Mary just told a story that I like a lot, Mary Curran. In the story, I see an equality of sentience, talking directly to the bears as opposed to just clanging pots and trying to scare them. I saw a video recently where a trained guide is protecting a naturalist from a grizzly bear that very much wants to charge. The guide has a gun, but it's pointed in the air. He uses words and body language to make his point successfully. Something communicates. The Latin root of the word communicate is from a word that means to share, literally to make common. The Latin word for communicate is also linked with the word commune. I'm using the roots of our own language to introduce a new word coined by Thich Nhat Hanh, interbeing. But first, I'm going to tell an apocryphal story about Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. About 1966 or so, a NASA team doing work for the Apollo moon mission took the astronauts near Tuba City, where the terrain of the Navajo Nation looks very much like the lunar surface. With all the trucks and large vehicles, there were two large figures that were dressed in full lunar spacesuits. Nearby, a Navajo sheep herder and his son were watching the strange creatures walk about, occasionally being attended by personnel. The two Navajo people were noticed and approached by the NASA team. Since the man did not know English, his son asked for him what the strange creatures were, and the NASA people told them that they are just men that are getting ready to go to the moon. The old man became very excited, and his son translated a message for the astronauts and asked if he could send a message to the moon with the astronauts, explaining, "The people of my tribe believe that holy spirits live on the moon. Could you pass an important message to them from my people?" Armstrong and Aldrin both nodded yes. The NASA personnel thought this was a great idea, so they rustled up a tape recorder. After the man gave them his message, they asked his son to translate. His son would not, explaining, "My father says I cannot tell you. It's a secret that only our tribe and the moon spirits are allowed to know." The astronauts were not satisfied with that response. And when NASA were leaving, they asked a few people on the reservation to translate. And every person they asked would chuckle and then refuse to translate. Finally, with cash in hand, someone translated the message. "Watch out for these guys. They come to take your land." Now, this story may be entertaining, but it can also teach. First, of course, it reminds us that terrestrial explorations have often resulted in the acquisition of indigenous lands. On the other hand, pictures of the Earth from space have given astronauts the experience that our Earth is whole and that we are all one people. Countries and tribes are invisible from space, and the sense that we are one people on one planet emerges. For some astronauts, their experience has been transformative. Neil Armstrong was reborn into mystery. Annie Dillard, a reliable writer of nonfiction, has a true story of similar theme. In her book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, she writes, "I read about an Eskimo hunter who asked the local missionary priest, if I did not know about God and sin, would I go to hell? No, said the priest, not if you did not know. The Eskimo responded in earnest. Then why did you tell me? So this story gets to the core of tribalism, the more powerful tribe spreading its worldview. We have inherited a story, governments and ways of doing business that amounts to we know and you don't, which is us versus them. This is a very old human story, the story of separation. Thich Nhat Hanh, who is also called Thai, established a Zen temple in the Order of Interbeing at the height of the Vietnam War in 1964. Previously, the monks were given an ultimatum to take sides, either communist or non-communist. At first, Thai thought communist because Marx wrote about equality. But then the communists gave them forms they needed to sign, which stated they could be asked to kill anyone. Thai knew they would have to stay neutral, which was dangerous from both sides, and that they stood for peace. After founding the Order of Interbeing, Thai invited 5 poets to recite peace poems at the monastery. All 5 poets were subsequently shot. But the soldiers said, "We are sorry we have to do this." Thai heard about this and at their funeral said that they needed to show compassion for the soldiers who did this because they would probably have been killed themselves if they disobeyed. He said soldiers on both sides were also suffering, as were innocent civilians. Thai said they needed to show love and compassion for all the soldiers, many of whom were also victims of the war. There likely were spies listening to Thai's eulogy, and after that day, they were completely left alone. The message of love had positive consequences. In 1967, Thai met for many hours alone with Martin Luther King. When they came out of their meeting, there were reporters. King came out against the war in Vietnam and later nominated Thai for the Nobel Peace Prize. Thai reports that King spoke about the beloved community, which Thai felt was in complete agreement with Interbeing. Thai was exiled from Vietnam and gained asylum in France. Originally, the Order of Interbeing was a response to the war and maintained that they should become aware of suffering and act in engaged and compassionate ways to the suffering they witness. They were to be peaceful, live simple lives, and hold truth as a goal and not as established doctrine. With time, as Thai expounded on Interbeing, it became a living, breathing connection with all sentient life. Some might think of interconnection as interbeing, while others may see the connection between species as a material result of evolution. In a mechanical view, trees breathe out oxygen and animals evolved to breathe oxygen. There is ecodependence without a deeper connection. Interbeing would see that trees and animals inter-are. Inter-are is interbeing in action. They are interacting through the flow of life. He said that a cloud and a cup of tea inter-are, because without the cloud, there is not water, and the tea needs water. There are a whole host of elements that interbe with tea: sunshine, the earth that grows the leaves, the air that holds space and interacts with molecules, people that pick the tea leaves, his cup. For Tai, drinking tea was a sacred act that brought him into communion with the creation. He would interbe with all the elements of the tea, which lifted his own being into the network of being and into a deep reverence for life. When interbeing becomes interbe, participation with the flow of life, you will treat the elements in the network of being as though they are yourself, because they are. You inter-are. You treat the world as if you are part of it, like your hand is part of your body. David Suzuki, scientist and activist, puts it this way. The way we see the world shapes the way we treat it. If a mountain is a deity, not a pile of ore, if a river is one of the veins of the land, not potential irrigation water, if a forest is a sacred grove, not timber, if other species are biological kin, not resources, or if the planet is our mother, not an opportunity, then we will treat each other with greater respect. Thus is the challenge, to look at the world from a different perspective. End quote. Joanna Macy, eco-philosopher, Buddhist scholar, and activist, states that there's a song that wants to sing itself through us. We just got to be available. Maybe the song that is to be sung through us is the most beautiful requiem for an irreplaceable planet, or maybe it's a song of joyous rebirth as we create a new culture that doesn't destroy its world. In this moment, you're alive, so you can just dial up the magic of that at any time. End quote. Dialing up the magic means going beyond the known so that the interconnected circle of life begins to play symphonies of synchronicity in ways impossible to predict. But that won't happen if we aren't singing together, a chorus that echoes the tone of creation. Becoming open to creation can charge our intuition if we are listening. Now, discernment is also useful in perceiving what is the known with clarity. Clarity can be moved by compassion, and these two wings can lead to wise action and can inform our choices. Engaging in wise action can arise from clarity, compassion, and through deep listening. We make choices all the time that have varying degrees of impact. Many of us would like to feel engaged with the process. So I'm going to use the human body, for example. Our human body is engaged in interconnection all the time. What could simply be called the mind-body connection. It starts with the interbe in our bodies. The mitochondria in our cells that engages metabolism were once separate bacteria, but over time merged with our body. Still, estimates are that our bodies consist of about 30 trillion cells we could call our cells, and about 40 trillion cells that are microbial and are not part of our body. That microbiome digests food and affects the health of our whole body. Some of that makeup is inherited through genes and circumstance, but much of it is cultivated, know it or not, by our environment and lifestyle choices. When we act through insight and awareness, we are, to the extent possible, stewards of our bodies and gardeners of our interconnected organism. For example, through diet and lifestyle choices, we can encourage the growth of a healthy microbiome, or we can feed bad bacteria and candida to the point where we become dysbiotic, which is not healthy. In like manner, all the choices we make every day can affect our degree of wise connection with the world around us. I live on about 2 acres of land that has been eco-disrupted many, many times. Like a gardener, I try to select for diversity over a monoculture of invasive species. It's a lot harder to do than I thought it would be. Invasive species and disease, past and current use of our land threatens eco-harmony all the time. To be wise stewards requires education, experience, and intuition or connection. When it comes to acting through interbeing, what we do as individuals matters and will support the collective consciousness. But both Martin Luther King and Thich Nhat Hanh also spoke about the importance of the beloved community, educating, reinforcing, and expanding our life-centered agenda with togetherness. How this plays out in daily life with connection-based outcomes is unknowable, but we do know that togetherness matters. Jane Goodall understood from an early age her deep connection with nature. It was one of the reasons Louis Leakey wanted her to study chimpanzees. In the Book of Hope, Goodall states that when she first went to Gombe, she felt that no animals would harm her when she was alone and unprotected in the forest because she was meant to be there. No doubt she was discerning, but things happened that couldn't be predicted, like a poisonous snake crawling over her leg, or a male lion appearing within charging range. She calmly walked away. And a black rhino that wanted to charge, but she knew to stay still. She states that she was not a scientist, as scientists were interested in the mechanics of how things worked. She said she was a naturalist who looks for the wonder of nature, the voice of nature, and tries to learn from it. She states that she is all too aware of the ongoing harm humans inflict on our planet. But she is resilient and keeps hope alive, in part because of her deep connection with a great spiritual power she found while alone in the forests of Gombe. She feels that power is with her at all times, and sharing that power with others helps her to give people hope. We are an intelligent species that is not wise, the only species that would destroy its home. We're not going to think our way past climate change. If we are going to thrive as a species, it will probably be through deep cooperation with the natural world and each other, when we interbee with every possible breath, heart, mind, and transpersonal forces informing our moments as we navigate a future. When we cultivate interbeing, our impulse will be to interbee wherever we are. You serve life and our shared world by serving wherever you are with the gifts you have to give. When you enter R, you will not be serving from guilt or obligation. You will serve from a felt sense of love. Your impulse will be toward compassion and wise action as your circumstance allows. Your prayers will not be selfish, and your hope will carry a spark of life. Your intentions will not be selfish, and your dreams will carry a spark of life. Thank you for your attention.